Okay, I'm going to take you guys through Photoshop techniques and practice. We have a slideshow that has all the steps here. This is a sample of my work that I did a couple of years ago, I would say. It contains basically a digital painting with a photograph inside. So we're going to need to have a photograph for this. And of course, by this point, we have taken a lot of different photographs. So you should have some in your Google Drive to use, or I actually gave you some here in this post that you could practice with. This is a slideshow of student work that we did about a year ago. So you could see the nice thing about this is that everybody's work looks very different and people chose different photographs, different colors. So feel free to look at this collection of things that other students did recently. Then these are just some sample pictures that you can download to use of places around the building, or definitely pick your own. I would encourage you to do that. I'm going to have a video in there for you guys to practice this one, obviously. And then let's see. And this is a Google Doc that will take you into the layers that you should have, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. So I'm going to open up Photopea, the online editor, and get rid of my old Photopeas that I had out. And this new thing was giving me trouble with some of the toolbars. We'll see. Hopefully I won't have any issues. So the first thing we want to do is we want to actually make a new file. So you're going to go to the File menu and you're going to go to New and create a new doc in Photopea. So that would be File, New. And I like to name my project ahead of time. So I'm just going to call this Miss I Test. And I always go to the Photo tab. And we're going to choose 8x12, which is about copy paper size, give or take a half an inch or so. And then because we take most of our pictures horizontally, holding the camera like this rather than vertically, I'm probably going to go with a vertical orientation by switching these arrows. And that gives me a horizontal. But if you like the tall way and you know you have pictures that are shot the tall way, you can go that vertical way. That's fine. And then I'm going to hit create. So this is our canvas, this white background. And what we have here is we have the layers palette. So the layers palette is this entire box right here, including these tools. You have a trash can. You have a new layer button. We have the ability to group those layers together. I don't use that a lot with you guys. We are going to mask. And we are going to use adjustment layers, just not these two right now. But today we will use the effects. And so if we go to these instructions here, we created our new document. Really the way I like to think of layers is I like to think of layers as the floors of a building stacked one on top of the other. Depending on the settings of the layers, you should be able to see down through to the floors if you use the certain settings in those layers. And that's different because in a program like Instagram, that's not a layers-based program. You don't have the power of layers in something like Instagram or even some of the abbreviated Photoshop apps. They do not have layers in them. But Photopea and Photoshop do. And you have some advantages with having multiple layers in your work. So back to Photopea. We are going to actually click right here on this new layer button. I like to use my pen here. The new layer button is that icon that I just circled. It looks like this. New layers. We're going to add 3 new layers. So you can click on it 3 times and it's going to put some layers right above your background layer. So I have 3 layers here and then we're going to click back to the background layer. So the active layer is always this highlighted one. It happens to be light gray in photopea.com. And then that's the one where the work is going to be happening here, whatever layer is highlighted on. So that's why I always tell you guys, keep your eye on the layers palette so you know where the work is happening. You have to constantly look there. All right, let's get rid of these annotations. We've got our layers, and now we're going to move to the gradient tool and start building a painting inside this document. So your gradient tool is a box that goes from black to white. You are going to find your gradient tool here. Any tool that has one of these little white arrows is a tool that has other tools located underneath if you do a right click. So right clicking tells us, of course, we have our gradient tool, and the paint bucket tool is hiding underneath, which we will use as one of our last steps here. So we'll stick with the gradient for now. And you do have the ability to change these colors. If you click on your foreground and background color, you will get the color picker. Now, I think because I'm doing a video, it's interfering with that, so I can't show you guys the color picker. But basically, if you just double click on this, you should get the color picker, and it will let you customize both your foreground color and your background color. I've set mine ahead of time with a purple and a green. And then the other thing to make note of is that anytime you click on a new tool, you will always have the options for that tool up in this second bar here. This is the options palette. Right now, the options for the gradient tool are out. So we have the ability to blend our foreground with our background color set here. You can blend your foreground with a transparent or nothing. And then you have a lot of presets like black and white, red, green. There are some reflective gradients here and some rainbows. So you can choose any of these, really. I already customized my colors, so I'm going to go with that. And then the way the gradient tool works is that you just click and drag across and let go. If you don't like the combination of that gradient, you can click and drag again, and it'll just shift it. So click and drag until you're happy with that. Now, some of the other features you can play around with are the shape of the gradient, and you can reverse it if you want to. But I'd leave your blending mode at normal. We're going to use blending modes down here later, and usually blending modes work with layers that are underneath, and right now nothing is underneath our background layer, so I'm going to leave that one alone. But you do have radial, which is circle shape. You do have an angle, which is a hard edge versus a soft edge. And you have a reflection. So if I pull it, it'll go green, purple, green, right? And you have a diamond. So the shorter you pull the gradient, the more abrupt the change is. The longer you pull it, the more gradual the change is. So go ahead and choose your gradient shape. Choose your preset or your foreground and background color, and basically fill the background with your gradient. If we go back to the directions, next thing we're going to do is use the brush tool. So our brush tool is going to be found right here. And if you click the letter B, that will automatically take you to the brush tool. The pencil tool is there, which you could also use. Color replacement I would use for photographs, but brush and pencil tool is good for what we're going to do next in both layer 1 and layer 2. So we want to use the brush tool in both of these layers, and you can really choose from a few different brush styles. So these fuzzy brushes are 0% hardness. These, harder edge brushes are 100% hardness. So you can decide what kind of edge you want. And you've got some different shapes here. These are sort of sponge brushes. These are a little bit more elongated. Choose any brush you want, and you should be able to change your brush color. Now, usually the foreground color is what you're going to be brushing with. So for me, I'd brush with purple here. Let me see if I can change my colors of the swatches as well. Yeah, definitely. So the swatches, you can also pick, it's limited here, but you could pick some standard colors. So I'm going to do something different, like, this kind of bright magenta. And it's up to you what you want to brush. You could write some words, you could draw some lines, but you want to fill your space. And I just did that. Oops, I did that in my background layer. So this is actually a good opportunity for me to tell you guys that when you make a mistake, you can go to edit and you can undo one step, or if you need to go back many steps, you can edit and step backwards several times. So going to the edit menu gives you undo for one step, many steps for step backwards. Okay. And I just want to click in my layer 1. That's where I really want to do my brushing in its own separate layer, which means I can edit it separately. I can hide it with the eyeball. I can drag it to the trash can if I decide I don't like it. I want to have the ability to edit it separately from the background layer. Now I'll pop into layer 2. Grab a really different brush, maybe a really thin brush this time. Pick a different color. And again, fill my space. I'm just making some patterns here with lines, but you could write, you could do a drawing, whatever works. So basically I have a painting here with a background layer and 2 layers of drawing. So now we can apply some effects to layer 2 and layer 1. Here's the effects down here. Let's just see where that brings us to page. Yeah, this actually brings us to page 7. Oops, sorry. This actually takes us to page 8. So this is where the effects are. You can get them in 2 places. In Photoshop, it's FX. And then in Photopea, it looks like EFF, but it means effects. Same thing, right? It's phonetically spelled. You could also get these same effects using the layer menu up here. So when we click on the layer menu, it's called Layer Styles, and you want to go to Blending Options. Okay, you can get those blending options down here as well, right? Blending options. The blending options just gives you this entire list, but it's all in one box together. So if you just move this out of the way, as you click on some of these blending options, they will create some effects. So I use drop shadow a lot because it puts a shadow underneath and it makes it pop out and look very 3D, but you can go ahead and test any of these. I don't like pattern because it changes my color and I liked the blue, but use them in combination with each other and see what you get. Find the ones you like. When you're happy with them, click OK. So I added effects in my layer 2, and now I'm going to add some effects by choosing blending options in my first layer as well. Yeah, so I got kind of an inner shadow here that made that a little bit more 3-dimensional with those magenta lines. And I click OK. All right. And then you'll also notice that if you bring this drop down, it tells you exactly what effects you have in there. I got rid of the pattern and the satin, but I left the drop shadow in there. So if you need to remember what they are, you can drop that effects menu down. All right, so here's where we add a picture. Now, this set of directions here works pretty well if you're using Photoshop in the classroom, but if you are using Photopea, and for the most part, if we're at home, a lot of us are using Photopea, I put this little note in here, okay? We wanna have our images downloaded first. So let's actually go here because when you're clicked on one of these images, you can use my practice images here. And what you may need to do, let's cancel. You may need to open this in a new window in order to get the download button. So I'm going to download that. I'm also going to go to my Google Drive for people that have pictures in their Google Drive. You'll need to locate those. I know in my photography folder, I have a composition folder. And I know I have some good pictures in my leading lines folder. Just thinking about what the best shot would be. Maybe the cones. So if you have pictures in your Google Drive, when you right click, you should be able to download them. And now I can go back to Photopea because I have some images downloaded. I'm just going to pick one of these, but I know you guys might have things located in different places, so we have to consider that. When we go to File and we go to Open, you'll see some of the images that I downloaded. Now, some of you guys might have pictures in your pictures folder from taking them right from the camera and plugging in the USB cables. So you could definitely grab your pictures from your pictures folder as well. It just depends on what you want to use. So get them from pictures or get them from your downloads folder. I'm going to use these locks because I think this will work pretty well for what I want to do here. So now what has happened is, if I take out my annotations, is I have two tabs open now. I've got my picture of the locks and I have my test file that I painted in right here. They're going to tab out the more I open up files here, just like your browser tabs would. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this layer and I'm going to get it into this painting layer. So there's a few ways we can do this. And one way is by clicking and dragging your background layer. If you touch it to the tab of the first file that you created, it should turn blue like this, and you should be able to drop it right in there. Okay? That's one way to get it in there. Now, I actually want this image layer to be on top of all my painting, and you do have the ability, if you have the Move tool, to click and drag those layers and reorder them. So now my picture layer is on top of everything. Don't worry if you can't see this stuff, it's fine. We know it's still there because we can see it in the layers palette. And if I just hide my picture with the eyeball for now, right, I can still see that my painting is there. So I'm going to turn that back on. Now, there is another way for you to take these pictures and get them into other files. And that would be to go to the Select menu, and you want to select all or hit Control A, and then you get these little black and white marching ants selecting the entire background layer here. Once you make a selection, then you're going to go to your Edit menu, and you're going to copy, or you can hit Control C on your keyboard. Once you've copied it, then you can bounce over to that file. Let's just pretend I didn't have that one in there, right? In fact, let's right click and delete it. I know I copied it from the original file. Now I can edit and paste, or Control V. So there it goes. A little bit slow to load in there, but it did copy over. So those are two ways to take one image and paste it into another. Okay, so we've got our picture in there. I'm going to delete these annotations and let's just check back with the directions here. So we added our picture. And now sometimes what you might find when you guys add your picture is that you need to resize it. And that's going to be going to edit and doing something called free transforming. So we go to the edit menu and we go to free transform. And that's going to put this sort of white bounding box around your image. Now, you can transform any layer that you're in, bigger or smaller. I could have made these lines bigger or smaller, right? I could even make my background painting bigger or smaller, but it's the picture that I might need to resize. So when I'm in free transform, edit, free transform, it will put a bounding box around there. Now my picture is so big, it actually kind of goes off the screen here. And I'm just going to go to view and zoom out one. So control minus or going to view and zooming out is going to give you a little bit better of a sense of where this picture is if your pictures are on the large side. And most of the time when your pictures are coming out of your camera, they are much bigger than these 8x12 documents that we set up. So I don't have to really shrink this. This actually fits pretty well, but I do want to show you that you can resize this. And I'm just bringing the bounding box in a little bit, and that fits a little better. And it's okay to overlap, and it's fine if I don't see any of this stuff yet. So when you're resizing stuff, one thing you need to be careful of, and we'll practice this as we go along with our editing skills, you have to be careful not to distort. So the way to keep your image distortion free is to just make the size changes with the corners and don't use the top, the sides, or the bottom. And the other thing you need to do at the same time as you are holding the corners is hold the shift key. Okay, so you go to the edit menu, you bring down to free transform. That's going to give you this white bounding box, right, all around. And then I'm only going to hold the corners and the shift key as I resize. So that's going to keep it in proportion pretty well. Okay, the moment I start doing this, I start squishing. That's not a good idea. We want to try to avoid distorting whenever possible. So again, I want to just go edit, step backwards, because I don't want that distortion in there. Okay, that's a little mini lesson on resizing, which I needed to do just a tiny bit of. You may or may not have to do this, but that's an important tool or skill. All right, now let's get rid of these annotations because we resized. And now we are going to use some selection tools. So the selection tools are in this general area here. You have some pretty standard shapes for selection tools, and you have specific selection tools that select by color or the edges of things by contrast. My document tells you to go to the magic wand, and the magic wand is going to select by color, which means if I have some brown in my picture like I do here, when I click on brown pixels, the magic wand is going to try to take things that are a similar color. And the goal here for layer 4 and using the selection tools is to cut out bits of your picture and just sort of remove pieces so that we start to see all this painting underneath. So as soon as I have a selection, I'm going to hit my backspace button, and now my painting is coming through. Now I'm going to click on some more of that dirt behind and delete, select and delete, select, delete, and select and delete. And I can keep going here just to show some of my painting coming through even more. Now, It's all dependent on the type of picture you have. So you may have different colors, or you may have all similar colors. You may need to use a different selection tool. You can go to the rectangle or the ellipse, and you can actually draw some shapes out and delete them there. So maybe I'll work on drawing a few, because that's another way to select and delete. And so my painting is coming through again, and that's exactly what I want. I could try it with the rectangle tool. I could also try the quick selection tool. Nope, that one's a tricky one. And if you need to deselect, you go to select and deselect, or Control D, and that'll get rid of a selection. But for me, the magic wand was working pretty well, so I'm going to just continue with that and get rid of some of my stuff in between the fence. So select and delete, select, delete. And it can be random. It doesn't have to be any kind of perfect selection at all. There's definitely ways to make perfect selections, but for this assignment, we really don't have to. And I'll get rid of that chunk right there. So I have the fence and the locks, which I think are an interesting part of the picture. All right, that looks good enough. Okay, our next step is going to be going to filters. And before I actually go to the filters, one thing I like to do is I like to make sure there's no selections, because sometimes they're really hard to see. And if you look right in this area after I click off of it, I did have a selection in there. It actually deselected. But just to be sure that there's no selections in here, it's not a bad idea to go to select and then choose the deselect, or just hit Control D. But I know I didn't have a selection in there, so now I'm safe. And the reason why you don't want any selections in there is because the filters are not going to work properly if you still have a tiny little selection remaining in there. And we want the filters to be applied to the leftover part of this picture. So I'm going to stay in layer 4. That's my picture layer. And I want to go to filter and filter gallery. And it might take a few seconds to load in Photopea because there's a lot of information in here for filters. And you're going to get a very close-up view here, but you can push it around to see what the rest of the image is going to look like. So I'll just kind of stay on my lock here. So I'm going to test out these filters and see what it gives me. And I'm just going to click until I find one that I like. Actually, I like the halftone pattern. They might take a few seconds to load as you click on them. You probably don't want to click super fast through them, because then Photopea.com might get jammed up on you. But find a filter that you like. And you do have some parameters that you can slide around for the different filters, and click OK. All right, so the filter is applied just to the image layer. So we did our filter, and now we have 2 steps left. Second to last is the paint bucket. So we need to go and find our paint bucket again. Remember, you're going to right click on the gradient tool to grab your paint bucket. Now your paint bucket is going to dump whatever your foreground color is set at, and I have a dark blue here right now. So because I have a lot of dark blue, I'm going to switch to something that I don't have just for contrast. And I'll grab the yellow because I don't think I have any yellow in here. And I'm going to click up to layer 3. this is where I want to do my paint bucket fill. I'm just going to click, dump it in there. Don't worry again if your paint bucket fill covers everything. That's fine. We know if we hide the fill, all of the layers are still underneath. We can see it in the layers palette. So I'll turn that fill back on. The very last step is choosing your blending modes. And there's at least, I think, 15 to choose from. And you're going to find your blending mode right here over at the top of your layers palette. So I am looking right here at normal, right? We're going to want to drop that down. By default, all of your layers are going to have a normal blending mode, but in layer 3, we're going to change it from normal to something different. And the idea with blending modes is that based on whatever colors or values you have in all of these layers, the blending modes are going to determine different effects that are going to, become visible. So if I just pick one to start, like color dodge, I'm starting to see down through to these other layers, like I was talking about, like the floors of a building. So this is color dodge. And the nice thing about the blending modes is once you choose one, you can then use your up and down arrow keys on your keyboard to then scroll through those blending modes, right? So here are your blending modes. Up and down arrow keys, scroll through. I'll just do my abbreviation for through, right? Now, some of the blending modes are going to work great and some of them are not going to work great because everybody's pictures and colors are different. So keep scrolling once you're on it. Right? Vivid light doesn't do much for me, but it might, depending on your choices. Stop on one of the blending modes that you like. So that's normal, darken. Multiply is cool because it starts to glow with blue. Difference or exclusion makes things very different. It almost takes it from positive to negative. I think I'm going to do overlay because I end up using that one a lot. Yeah, pretty bright. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to save. So we go to File, we save it as a PSD. And that is going to end up going into your downloads folder. Mine automatically opens in Photoshop, which will not happen for you guys. But if I go to downloads, you're going to see that I have my Miss I test file right here. And that's something that I can actually drag into my Google Drive. So if I go back to my Google Drive that I happen to have open here, and I'm in my photography folder, I like to have 2 windows open at once. So let's kind of minimize this. I can drag that test file into my Google Drive, and you want to see that plus copy. And then you know that it's actually uploading. Okay, and I have a lot of these files in here, so I'm going to keep separate so that I don't overwrite anything. And then you'll see that your upload is complete once it's uploaded. Now, you can also upload your files by going here to New File Upload. You will have to navigate to your Downloads folder. That's where things had been going when you save them as a PSD file in Photopea. And you can upload that way as well when you hit Open. Okay, and then you're going to hand these into your Google Classroom assignment. And that is the process from start to finish. So have fun with that.